So when we think about our own safety,
Mm.
our own security, right? We usually think about locks. Like
Mm.
you lock your front door, you lock your car. You basically build this, I don't know, this little fortress of routine around yourself.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that predictable rhythm, just the rhythm of a Tuesday,
Hmm.
is kind of the foundation of human sanity. You know where you're going, you know who you are, and you just trust that the ground is, well, going to be there when you take a step.
Right. But what if one day you step out your front door and that entire world, just
Yeah.
evaporates?
Oh,
And
man.
it's not that someone picked the lock, it's that the very concept of a door or your home or even like your own identity is just entirely erased in an
Yeah,
instant.
it's completely gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that terrifying, that psychological cliff is exactly what a free man named Solomon Northup was pushed over in 1841. So today we are taking a deep dive into a really remarkable short script from a local history project. It's called Echoes of the Alpine. And, you listening have probably seen the Oscar-winning movie 12 Years a Slave, or at least you've heard the name Solomon Northup.
Yeah, it's a very famous story.
But what this specific local history document does, what it really reveals, are the invisible, like the deeply psychological mechanics of his survival. We're going to explore how a completely ordinary life can just instantaneously turn into an absolute nightmare.
Mm.
And I guess more importantly, the incredible machinery of hope that it takes to endure it.
Well, and what makes this local script so compelling is how it anchors this massive, this national tragedy in a very specific, localized place.
Yeah.
It starts and ends in the mountains of upstate New York. It really forces us to look at the institution of American slavery not as some abstract historical concept, but through this profound, very raw firsthand account of a man whose entire world was just stolen from him.
Right. So we are heading into the heart of the Adirondacks for this.
Beautiful area.
It is. Specifically, the communities of Olmstedville and Minerva, New York. And this is in the early 1800s, so this is where Solomon Northup's world was built. He was born a free man in 1808 in Olmstedville, and he grew up just around the Minerva area.
And the foundation of his identity, before the catastrophe, it's built on three very distinct pillars. He was a farmer, he was a violinist, and he was a family man.
Which is such an interesting combination, right?
It really is.
And honestly, it's the very mundanity of those pillars that makes the violence of his kidnapping so universally terrifying. Like if you think about the anchors of your own life right now, your job, your hobbies, playing an instrument maybe, your family,
Yeah.
it feels secure, right? But this proves that the line between absolute security and total erasure was, practically non-existent.
Yeah.
Like, is it this very ordinariness that makes his story so terrifying?
Absolutely. I mean, think about the mechanics of being a farmer in the Adirondacks in the early 19th century.
That is not an easy life.
No, not at all. It's not a transient lifestyle. A farmer in that landscape is literally tied to the earth. You're working the soil, navigating these brutal winters, deeply understanding the local ecology.
You really have to know the land.
Exactly. It requires patience and a profound connection to the physical environment. He
Yeah.
had agency, right, over his own labor and the land he worked.
Right. And then you add the second pillar, which is the violinist,
Yeah.
which is just a fascinating contrast to the rugged farming life, I think.
It's incredible because playing the violin, it requires intense mental focus, muscle memory, and a real understanding of complex, invisible structures, which is music itself, right?
Right, yeah.
It shows a man actively engaged in art and culture. It's a pursuit of beauty and intellect that goes completely beyond just basic survival. It highlights this incredibly rich internal life.
And then the third pillar, being a family man, just roots him in community and love. When you put those three things together, the physical grounding of the landscape, the intellectual pursuit of the art, and the deep emotional bonds with his family, you have a fully realized, free individual. He is just deeply, deeply embedded in the fabric of upstate New York.
And that absolute embeddedness makes the impending disruption cataclysmic. It wasn't
Yeah.
just, a change of address. It was the violent shattering of all three of those pillars simultaneously.
It's so heavy. So in 1841, Solomon travels to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And while he's there, he is kidnapped by slave traders, he is drugged, he's beaten, and he's sold into slavery in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And he ends up spending the next 12 years enduring unimaginable hardship on plantations.
12 years.
12 years. And throughout this entire time, his family back in New York had absolutely no idea what had happened to him.
Yeah, the mechanics of how this happened in the nation's capital require a much closer look, I think. Because Washington, D.C. in the 1840s wasn't just the seat of government.
Right.
It was a bustling, highly lucrative hub for the domestic slave trade.
Which is just devastatingly ironic, isn't it?
It really is.
You have the epicenter of American liberty, right? The
Yeah.
place where laws are debated and all these monuments to freedom are constructed. And it's acting as the literal staging ground for the destruction of a free citizen's life.
It's a very dark reality. Free Black citizens traveling across state lines during this era, I mean, they faced extraordinary danger. The system was basically designed to be predatory.
Yep.
Slave traders utilized these incredibly deceptive tactics. In Solomon's case, it was the promise of lucrative employment playing his violin for a circus.
Wow. They used his art against him.
Exactly, to lure him out of his secure environment. And once he was in a vulnerable position, the trap was sprung. You mentioned he was drugged, which allowed them to bypass any immediate physical struggle or, any outcry.
Right.
By the time those drugs wore off, he was literally in chains. His identity as a free New Yorker was completely stripped away by the people holding the keys.
See, I want to focus on the psychological torture of that realization for a second. Just for you listening, imagine vanishing without a trace. You wake up, your freedom is gone, your name is denied, and you are thrust into a completely alien world. And knowing your family has no idea where you are for over a decade.
That's agonizing.
It really is. And the local history script, it draws a really brilliant structural contrast here between two totally opposing landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the free, cool, mountainous region of the Adirondacks where he had his agency. And then you have the brutal, sweltering heat of the Louisiana plantations, which is characterized by forced labor and just unimaginable physical hardship.
And you have to understand, to the people enslaving him in Louisiana, he isn't a farmer who understands the seasons, or a violinist who understands beauty.
Right. They don't care about any of that.
Not at all. Or a family man who is loved. To them, he is property. They attempt to systematically erase his past, basically gaslighting him into the narrative of the plantation. And meanwhile, his family back home is just frozen in time, waiting for a man who's seemingly vanished into thin air.
But wait, let me push back on how he mentally handled this for a second.
Yeah.
Because the script places a huge emphasis on him carrying the memory of his beautiful free life in the Adirondacks with him.
Yes, it does.
But wouldn't clinging to those memories make the torture of the plantation infinitely worse? Like, how does remembering everything you've lost not just turn into salt in the wound? It seems like it would just breed absolute despair.
That is such a critical tension to understand here, because in many trauma situations, people do dissociate, right? Or they try to block out the before because the contrast is just too painful to bear.
Exactly.
But what Solomon engaged in was a preservation of what psychologists might call the object permanence of the self.
Object permanence of the self.
Yeah. So if he let go of the memory of Olmstedville, if he stopped remembering what it felt like to hold his violin or to, see his family, he would be conceding to the plantation's narrative.
Oh, wow. I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah. The system was designed to break the mind before it broke the body. So by keeping the memories alive, even if they were incredibly agonizing, he maintained an internal fortress. It was his daily silent proof that the environment around him was lying to him.
That is incredible. He essentially built a smuggler's hold in his own mind.
It's a smuggler's hold. Yeah.
Like, on the outside, he's projecting whatever compliance is necessary to survive the immense physical brutality of the system. But on the inside, beneath the floorboards, he is silently gathering data and hiding his true identity.
A smuggler's hold is the perfect way to describe it, honestly, because it implies active, dangerous work happening completely out of sight.
Right.
I mean, despite 12 years of hardship, the script notes he never gave up hope. But hope wasn't just like a passive, warm feeling for him. It was an actionable strategy.
Okay, so what did that strategy look like?
Well, the first tool mentioned in this cognitive rebellion is that he secretly learned to read and write.
Wait, really? The mechanics of doing that as an enslaved person are just staggering to think about?
Oh, it's mind-blowing. Literacy was legally forbidden for enslaved people. The system recognized that education was the single most potent threat to its existence.
Because it relied on keeping people isolated.
Exactly. Isolated and uninformed. So learning to read and write wasn't sitting down with a textbook in a classroom. It was a deeply dangerous, highly subversive act of rebellion.
Right.
It meant stealing moments, observing shipping labels, studying discarded scraps of paper, and piecing together this forbidden code, all while knowing that discovery could mean severe punishment or even death.
He is literally forging the keys to his own potential liberation in total secrecy.
Yes.
And the script points out another tool in that smuggler's hold.
Ah.
You memorize details, which I mean, in this context, that goes way beyond just passing the time, right?
Absolutely. Memorization is an act of mapping. Think about it. When you have zero physical power, your observation becomes your primary weapon.
Wow, yeah.
The system of slavery tried to strip people of their orientation in time and space. They wanted you disoriented. So by memorizing names, shipping routes, geographical landmarks, and the specific habits of the people holding him captive, he was engaging in the strategic accumulation of intelligence.
Right, he was gathering evidence.
Exactly. He was preserving human sovereignty by refusing to be disoriented.
Okay, so that internal fortress kept his mind intact. But as we know, a locked mind doesn't free a physical body.
Unfortunately not.
Right. To do that, he had to take that secret literacy, that vast map of memorized details, and somehow turn it outward into the physical world.
Yes. All of that internal preparation, that mental filing cabinet, it was the necessary prerequisite for the execution of an incredibly precarious escape plan.
Okay, so after 12 long years, he manages to get a letter smuggled to friends in New York.
Yeah.
And the physical logistics of this in the 1850s are almost impossible to fathom.
You really have to consider every single barrier he faced.
Yeah, walk me through it.
First, finding paper and ink. Those were highly restricted commodities.
Right.
Second, composing the letter without being caught.
Which is terrifying on its own.
Completely. And third, the most dangerous step of all, finding someone to trust to take it.
Because handing that piece of paper to an intermediary, I mean, that requires a leap of faith that could easily result in execution if he was betrayed.
It could have ended right there.
It is the 1850s equivalent of a message in a bottle, tossed into an ocean of surveillance, needing to travel over 1,000 miles to land precisely at the feet of the one person who could decipher it and act on it.
And that single piece of paper, which was born out of that smuggler's hold of his mind, it triggered the legal and political machinery necessary for his rescue.
Amazing.
In 1853, that letter finally reached his allies in New York. And because he was a free citizen kidnapped from a free state, there were specific, though, very complicated legal avenues his friends and powerful allies could pursue to demand his return.
And they did. He is pulled out of the nightmare. He travels all the way back up the coast, leaving the sweltering heat of Louisiana, and returns home to the cool air of the Adirondacks and to his family.
He finally made it back. But, the profound impact of this local history document is really what he did next.
Right.
Solomon Northup didn't just survive this 12-year ordeal and quietly fade back into his ordinary life. He weaponized that smuggler's hold of memorized details one last time in the public sphere.
Because he documented everything. He sat down and he wrote 12 Years a Slave.
He transformed his trauma into an indispensable piece of American history. I mean, the ultimate so what of this whole source material is that he ensured his stolen life wasn't forgotten. The book became one of the most raw, detailed, and important firsthand accounts of American slavery ever published.
It's just an incredible legacy.
It really is. He forced the country to look at the horrifying reality of the institution through the eyes of someone who had lived in freedom, had it stolen in the nation's capital, endured the absolute darkest depths of the plantation system, and then clawed his way back out.
Yeah.
He refused to let his 12 years of stolen life be just a personal tragedy. He made it a national reckoning.
He laid out the map he had been silently building in his head for over a decade so that everyone else could see the trap.
Beautifully put, yes. And connecting this history back to the physical ground we started on the local script leaves us with a really powerful perspective on the geography itself.
How so?
Well, today, when you drive through Olmstedville, Minerva, or the surrounding towns in the Adirondacks, you aren't just looking at pretty mountain scenery or quiet, ordinary communities.
You're traveling through a living monument.
Exactly.
The landscape itself is a reminder that monumental battles for freedom and justice didn't just happen in, distant battlefields or marble courthouses, right? They were fought for right there in those mountains.
Right.
It's where Solomon was born free, where the memory of those specific trees kept him sane in Louisiana, and where he eventually returned as a free man.
It fundamentally changes how you interact with the local environment. It reminds us that profound history is constantly beneath our feet. It's embedded in the very roads we might commute on every single day.
So we started with a brief script from Echoes of the Alpine, and it uncovered the invisible mechanics of survival. We followed an ordinary Adirondack farmer and violinist into an unimaginable nightmare.
Yeah.
We explored the cognitive rebellion of secret literacy and mapping, the agonizing but vital preservation of memory and the sheer logistical miracle of a smuggled letter that ultimately changed American history.
And, Solomon survived the absolute darkest years of his life by holding on to the very specific memory of his mountain home. It was the anchor that kept his identity from washing away.
Right.
So I would ask you listening to reflect, if you were stripped of absolutely everything, your title, your possessions, your geography, your freedom, what specific landscape, what deeply rooted mental image of home would you hold on to remember who you truly are?
What is the image that keeps your internal door locked? Because at the end of the day, when the physical locks fail and the routine evaporates, the only fortress you really have left is the one you've built inside your own mind.